Hey, it's Joe Solari, and welcome back to the Business of Writing. Today's guest is Laura Morelli. How you doing, Laura?
Joe, I'm great. How are you doing today?
Really good, really good. So, I think the first time we met was in Chicago, right? At
It
the
was, yeah, the Selmore
Selmore
Book
Book,
Summit.
yeah. Which I actually mentioned. I talked to Brian the other day because it was like, wow, that like it was a year, just about a year ago though they had the last one. It seemed like wasn't that long ago, but time's flying when you're sitting at home in shelter.
Sitting at home on Zoom all day.
Yeah, exactly. So I really appreciate you coming on and wanted to talk about, you've got a big book launch that's I find really interesting in some of the things you're doing, and as well as just your background and how you've taken what must have been a lot of time at school
Yes.
and turned it into both a fiction and nonfiction career.
Yeah,
So why don't
absolutely.
you tell a little bit about yourself and how you got started?
Okay, sure. Well, I'm one of those people who started stapling pages together when I was 4 years old and writing and illustrating them. Always have been a writer and have loved writing. And when people ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up as a kid, I always said I wanted to be an author or an archaeologist. And so I'm sort of fortunate because I sort of got to do what I wanted to do when I was old. I went to college and studied art. I became really fascinated with the topic of art history, wanted to go as far as I could go in school. So I ended up working toward a PhD in art history from Yale University. And I was all set to be a tenure track professor and teach art history for my career. But somewhere along the way, that old itch of wanting to write creatively was still there and wanted to be scratched. So
Mm-hmm.
when I turned 40, I started writing fiction. Now, I had published several nonfiction books at that time. They were nonfiction shopping guides, travel guidebooks. They were traditionally published in the late 90s through the early 2000s when that was the only path available. I was very fortunate at that time. I got numerous offers from literary agents and a traditional New York publishing deal. I was happy with it, but when I started to see indie publishing emerge around 2012, 13, I became really interested in it. I'm kind of an entrepreneur at heart. And so when
Mm-hmm.
I finished my first novel, I didn't even submit it to a literary agent. I just went directly into indie publishing because I really was eager to learn the whole picture, the book and the cover design, the marketing, and writing journey. This year, I've dipped back into traditional publishing with my fiction. So in 2020, I have one published novel and one traditionally published novel coming out. So it's been a very interesting year, planning the launch of both of the books and seeing things overlap and everything I write has to do with art history. I have, as I mentioned, a nonfiction side, but I also have several books of historical fiction. And I find that really allows me to leverage my background in art history. And because the most fascinating world anyway, it's a perfect subject for me to write a novel about.
Mm. Well, yeah, I actually, when I was in college, I took quite a few art history classes, and it's always so fascinating. It's a fascinating way to learn history because you're learning about the lives of these artists in the context of, the world they're living in. And, most of these guys were, especially the ones you're talking about, like in the Renaissance and this upcoming, they're kind of connected people. Like they're living with some of the big names of the society, whether it's the Medicis or the popes or.
It's crazy, really. I mean, this book that has just come out this month is called The Giant, and it's a novel about the creation of Michelangelo's David. And I think not many people realize that while Michelangelo was working on the David, Leonardo da Vinci was down the street working on Elisa at exactly the same time and place, which is crazy. You know, and they were surrounded by the likes of, as you said, the Medici, Botticelli, all of these, you know, famous Italian Renaissance artists. It was just an incredible moment in history. And, you know, we know so much about this time period. There's so many facts that are known, and so there are a lot of historical events and facts to pin a plot on, and yet there's so much that we don't know. That for me, that's the fun of historical fiction, is sort of taking the facts as far as you can go and then realizing that there's a whole lot of stuff that we don't know, and that's where the fiction begins. So it's for me, writing historical fiction is sort of a great big puzzle in that way.
Well, and this book is, like you said, it's based on real characters. Your main character was a painter and sculptor. And why don't you tell a little bit about how you've kind of woven the facts and fiction together in that story?
Okay, so you know, we know quite a bit about Michelangelo's David. I always start with primary sources, in other words, things that people wrote about at the time, because I think it gives us some interesting insights into what important or interesting to talk about and what things they leave out. So we know quite about the circumstances of the commission for Michelangelo's David, how it was sculpted and how it was unveiled in a very public setting in 1504 in Florence, Italy. Well, at that time, we also know that there was this artist named Jacopo Torre. I bet that most other people have never heard of him, but according to contemporary sources, he was Michelangelo's closest friend. And those sources tell us that he was very funny, that he was lazy, that he loved telling jokes, that he loved playing tricks and practical jokes on people. Very little of his work is left. We know that he traveled to Rome in 15 work with Michelangelo on the Sistine ceiling. And that's about it. So we know very little about this Jacopo, but we know just enough to make him come alive in our imagination as this tantalizing, interesting character. So for me, it was a lot of fun to make up Jacopo's story, at least the parts that we don't know, and plug him into this rich tapestry of historical facts that we do know. A ton of work, but I love the research process. So for me, that's a joy.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that. How much, for somebody that might be thinking about historical fiction, you know, how much time are you spending doing research? Because, you know, you mentioned, maybe it was prior to us recording, but your plan is to put out 2 books this year. So for a lot of indies, that's like, how do you do that? Only put out
you know, it's interesting. This book is a project. This is a very unique project because I actually started it 20 years. I hate to say, but it started out as a nonfiction book, and I put it away and brought it out, put it away, brought it out. And one day I realized, oh goodness, this is not a nonfiction book. This is a novel. And so it took a lot of years and a lot of iterations and a lot of putting it away, a lot of going back to the research. I ended up, in the meantime, working on other projects pertaining to the Italian Renaissance that sort of touched back to that Michelangelo's David project. So the research went on for a very long time. Now, the second book I have coming out this year, in contrast, was very quick to write. And it also is, you know, big topic. It's a famous portrait by Leonardo da Vinci that was stolen during World War II. And so needless to say, there was a ton to research in the Italian Renaissance as well as World War II. But the story is very tight, and it's a dual timeline tale that goes back and forth. And so I don't know, for some reason it sort of came out a lot faster. And I think with historical research and historical fiction, it's very easy to get lost going down the rabbit holes because it is so much fun for those of us who love to do historical research. So I found that, you know, once I have my story idea and my plot outlined, and I've done a lot of general reading, that as I'm writing, I know it'll become evident I need back and look for a specific piece of information, like what street was that where they were in 1943, or what did
Mm.
this building look like in 1510? You know, I'll make myself little notes and brackets as I go through. But, you know, if a historical novelist has her work, all of that information dump should be invisible to the reader. I mean, it should, a good historical novel should pull people down, should immerse people in the past, and they shouldn't feel like they're being knocked over the head with a history lesson or an
Yeah.
right? So that's the trick. That's really the trick, I think, with historical fiction, is weaving in all of that, all of the details. I do find that details are a good way to, you know, to weave things in. You know, I'll give you an example. Jacopo in my book, The Giant, he's got a little bit of a gambling problem. So, you know, I taught the bone dice and putting them into the leather pocket of his work apron. You know, so you can bring in details like that, historical details, so that people can imagine the scene without it being a scholarly treatise on, you know, leather working in 16th century Florence.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that's the interesting part of it, is when you kind of sprinkle those details in there, so people understand that, you know, the context of what they were living in, and it's not just like reading a history book, right? Some of the best historical fiction, when you come out of it, not only do you get a good tale, but you know so much more about the period.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big draws to the genre. And, you know, my readers tell me that that's one of the main reasons why they come to historical fiction, is because they want to learn something, you know, but they want to live it. They want to immerse themselves and feel what it was like to, you know, smell or taste or, you know, observe the world in a certain time and place. And so I think that's one of the big joys of reading historical fiction.
So tell me a little bit about, like, with The Giant and that particular launch. You know, I'm on your newsletter and I saw what you're doing. Could you kind of walk folks through how you know, what you're doing with this launch?
Okay.
And then, like, how did you come up with these ideas? Because for me, it was just a real interesting mix of what we were just talking about, is like you were launching a book, but you're also helping people understand the times and circumstances of that book.
Oh, well, thank you. I wish I could say there was a grand master plan that I was following, but I sort of have just experimented with a whole lot of different stuff. But what I have found for my readers and for my historical fiction audience is, because they love to learn, they want more behind the book. You know, the first question, if I ever join a book club, the first question what really happened, and what parts did you make up, and that scene where they did this, did that really happen? You know, so what I've done, instead of doing just a traditional author note in the back of the book, which is sort of standard for historical fiction, is instead I am directing readers to my website, and in exchange for their email address, they get access to a kind of behind the scenes research vault, is what I'm calling it. And essentially it's a section of my website that's set up with a dozen or so different posts. And each post is a topic. So for example, for The Giant, my research vault includes things like gambling during the Italian Renaissance, life in jail in 16th century Florence. That's a little bit of a spoiler, I guess. You know, some of the original accounts of Michelangelos David, and I also, because I have so many years standing in front of a classroom of college students, I actually produced an hour-long video lecture about Michelangelos David specifically. And so that's there as well. It's kind of like an hour-long master class just on the David. So if people get to the end of the novel and they want more, then they can go behind the scenes and learn a little bit more of their book club questions. There's a kind of why I wrote this book, type post, and there's information about Carrara marble and all kinds of geeky art history details for anyone who wants to learn more. And it's gone well. I mean, I'm now getting, emails from readers saying, hey, I've made it to the end of the book and it was great. And then I went to your website and this is really cool. And, my spouse and I are sitting on the couch with popcorn watching this video and it's really fun. And now I appreciate it. Or, I've gotten really good feedback that's the kind of content that people enjoy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned Carrara. That's where my father's side of the family came from.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You may have some stonemasons. You probably do have some stonemasons in your family tree.
So when they came over there, it'd be my great grandfather came over. They came in through Louisiana.
Really? Wow.
Because there was some marble quarries there. And when they came in, they changed their names to Archie, Floyd, Sherman, and Joe.
I love it.
And then
before.
Well, so my grandfather, his original name was Achille, and he became Archie.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it.
So yeah, and I've actually got some Carrara marble. It was their coffee table.
Wow.
So what they ended up, he migrated up to Chicago, and they were doing a lot of marble work for cathedrals and cemeteries. So there's a lot of scrap marble that got.
Yeah, how cool is that, Joe? Yeah. I had no idea. That's really neat. Have you visited Carrara?
I have not.
You need to go. It's a really, really cool place to be able to tour those quarries and see how they still mine the marble as they did even in the Roman period. It's kind of crazy.
And we do have family that's still there. So there's folks that, when you go, we have to go visit. My aunt's been over there, and there's actually a lot of family history.
Yeah, well, you definitely need to put that at the top of your list once travel is viable again.
Yeah. We did get, when we were over there, we got to Florence and Venice, where I know you've put several of your books.
That's really cool.
You had mentioned when we had met at NINC that you had also done some classes where tied to your books for folks that were looking for you to kind of help them experience your books when they go to a place like Venice. Did I remember that right?
Yeah, so what I've done is I've started taking a lot of the type of content that I've taught at the college level, and I've kind of repackaged it into some online courses. And it's gone incredibly well. I mean, I'm like kind of blown away, to tell you the truth, because last year I launched a course on the art of the ancient Etruscans. And you probably have some Etruscan in your blood too, if you're from Carrara. And I thought, oh, this is such an esoteric topic. It's something that I really love. And I mean, the Etruscans are fascinating. And but it's such a small topic. I thought, well, a few other art history geeks like me are going to appreciate this. I was blown away at the number of people who wanted to register for this class. And I mean, around the world. I have students now from New Zealand, Australia, from Hong Kong, from Canada, from the US, from all over Europe. It's really something. I have several Italian tour guides from the Central Italian area that have signed up for my class. So it's been really fun. And many of your audience will probably say, well, that doesn't pertain to what I'm doing because I'm writing fiction. But what I've found interesting, and this has borne out with this book launch, is that my audience is the same. So for my particular audience, my readers, the readers of my historical fiction are by and large, let's say 40 and up. They tend to be more educated. They tend to not be very price sensitive. They tend to be people who enjoy travel and learning about other cultures. They have an appreciation for the arts. So they're reading historical fiction, but they might also be interested in an art history course. So, anyone, I know there are a lot of authors who write fiction and nonfiction, but often the topics are not necessarily related. They're kind of like two separate identities. But what's been really fun for me to watch is that, I can actually create different things for the same audience. I have this group of people who are just as happy to read a historical novel as they are to take, an online course about the ancient Etruscans. And, I really wasn't sure how many of my Etruscan fans were going to go out and buy a historical novel about Michelangelos David, but they did. And so I think that's really exciting. So I have another course I'm working on right now about Michelangelo for those who want to take their knowledge deeper. And then I'll have one later this year about Leonardo da Vinci, since he plays an important role in my September historical novel called The Night Portrait. So it's been a good marriage of fiction and nonfiction, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, and with that, so for example, the ebook, what's it selling for?
All of my ebooks, now don't faint, my indie friends, are $9.99.
Okay.
And they've always been, and it works for me. I know that's a very high price point for many indie authors, but I think that it's the genre. And historical fiction is still largely dominated by traditional publishers. My books are, some of them are standalones, and they are, book club type material. And if you're looking for a book for your book club in the historical fiction genre, and you go to Amazon to search, if you go search for a World War II historical novel for your book club, chances are it's going to have come from Random House or HarperCollins or one of the big five, and it's going to be well over $10 for the ebook. So really, in comparison, my $9.99 book doesn't really stand out at all, as being expensive in that niche. Perhaps that will change over time, but for now, that remains the case. Well, I've experimented a little bit with my pricing over time, but I've just found that the $9.99 price point works for me. So here it is right now.
And then in comparison to that, like, what do you charge for your Etruscan course?
So that course has a free lecture. And then if you want to join the full course, it's $397. So, it's back when you and I were in Chicago. I sat down with the lovely Monica Leonel, and she really set me straight about, look, you need to have a whole variety, a portfolio of products from free to, expensive in various price points. And I really took her advice to heart. And I thank her for sharing that with me and, helping me kind of wrap my brain around it as a business model and laying it out. I don't know if you recall, she gave a really wonderful talk about,
that's good.
I believe she called it the novelist's dilemma, where we have all of these books with a very small margin, and then you've got your film deal on the other end of the spectrum, and there's this huge hole in the middle where we don't have any products to serve the market. And so for me, these art history courses have become that kind of mid-priced product that I'm able to sell to the same audience as my novels. So it's worked out as a really great business model for me.
Well, that was a great lecture. And I think that that's something that a lot of authors want to do, but they can't really get their head around and essentially how to do it. And you've done a really good job in making that happen. Not that you're going to think that you're going to get everybody that buys a $9.99 book to pay $300 for a course.
No, definitely not. And that's fine, but there are, on the other hand, a lot of people who, say, I love to take that course, but I can't really do it right now. But yeah, I'll buy a book for $9.99. That's cheap in comparison. So it's interesting, isn't it? How it's sort of just a change in mindset.
Well, and it's something I've talked to authors about. I think they kind of come at the market from where they are at, and they don't think that maybe there's somebody that's reading their book that owns their own jet airplane,
Right.
where their context for money is different, and they would be prepared to pay money, $10,000 to go on a trip to Venice with you.
Right. Yeah. I think you're right about that. Another thing that I did with this launch that sort of bears that out is I decided to really focus on direct sales, which I've never really put a lot of energy behind before. You always launched with, hey, you can buy it. Yeah, you can buy it on my website if you want. Also get it at Amazon and iBooks and everywhere else, and Kobo and and all of the outlets. But this time I really I sent people to my website first. Now on my website, they can peel off to Amazon or Apple or wherever they want to, and that's totally fine. But I send them to my book sales page on my website first. And I actually have stayed up very late over the last few weeks with my 14-year-old daughter packing mailers with books. And people are paying shipping that they wouldn't have to pay if they bought it from Amazon. They're willing to wait because I ran out of hardcovers. I did hardcovers through Ingram, and not realizing that they were actually very badly delayed. FYI for anyone who's trying to upload a print book during a pandemic. Normally, they will ship within 5 or 6 days. Well, when I went to order my author copies, there was a turnaround time of 25 days. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to miss my pub date. So I just emailed everyone who had bought a hardback, a signed hardcover for me. And I said, I'm sorry, but the printer, because of this pandemic, they're on a skeleton crew, it's delayed. No one's claimed, and I've sent out a ton of books. Now, is it worth it? I mean, I'm sure some authors will say, well, that's not really worth my time. It's a ton of time to sign the books. I have some little tchotchkes that I put in there with them. I write a handwritten note to every person who orders a book, a printed book for me, thanking them for buying, and seal them up, print off the postage, and take them to the post office. That's probably not paying for my time, but I feel like if I take the effort to do that and to write a handwritten personal note to a reader, then they're my customer, they're my reader, and so they'll come back to me again next time when I have a new book out. So for me, that is sort of more about just building those readers and building those people who are going to tell their friends and share the story with their friends in their book club. So it's been
absolutely.
It's been a lot of work, but I think it's worth it.
And I would agree with you. There's a lot of hesitancy to get into direct sales, but the one thing that you are doing is you're building a one-to-one relationship with your customers. There's nothing ever bad about that. Right. And you're building this community, and that's going to pay off when those people are becoming advocates for your product, right? Like when somebody,
exactly.
And that's really what we want. We get all focused on all this other types of marketing, ads and Amazon, Facebook, all that. But like, if you've got people talking about your book over a glass of wine or after dinner, that's the best kind of advertising.
Put a price on that. Yep, yeah. Absolutely.
Can you kind of share with what was the breakdown of like print versus ebooks that you sold direct?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know, actually. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I would say I sold at least as many hardcovers as anything else. So I'm selling hardcovers, paperbacks, large print, Kindle, and EPUB. And the audio, I haven't quite figured out efficiently direct yet. because, you got to have the right app, and I'm not there yet, but hopefully I'll get to, I'm still sending people to the audiobook stores for now.
Yeah.
But
Well, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I was sort of amazed at the huge demand for hardcovers.
Mm-hmm.
That was what people, for the most people wanted to buy directly from me. So I take that to mean that maybe they see it sort of as a special thing, a collector's item, something they're
Mm-hmm.
willing to pay $7, to have shipped to their house instead of purchasing it from Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever.
Mm. Well, I think also there's a balance between the convenience of the sale and them wanting to get the money to the artist, right? They want to support you.
Yeah, I think there are some people like that don't want to. They would prefer for you to have the money instead of one of the online retailers. So I understand that.
Yeah. I know with audiobooks, I think that's going to change. Certainly right now, I know Findaway Voices has a direct sales platform, but you're still sending them to their platform.
Right.
But I think you will see probably within the next 12 months the ability to sell audiobooks through like what you're doing. You're using what, WooCommerce?
I use WooCommerce, and I have it integrated with BookFunnel.
Yeah.
Just to make it easier. As I said, many of my readers are older, and so BookFunnel is way to go. BookFunnel, they're awesome with the ease of getting it onto your device and then handling the tech support. It really is. They're great.
Yeah, and we just got to keep on Damon to get the ebook or the audiobook portion of that to work just like the ebook portion, and it's going to be awesome.
Exactly. As soon as that audiobook functionality is there, I'm all in 100%.
Yeah. And it's coming soon.
That's great.
Yeah. So why don't you tell folks a little bit about like kind of the books, the launch you got now, where they can find you, as well as like, I know you mentioned a traditionally published book you have coming out. Kind of share with folks, where they can find you and how they can check out these courses and see some of the things that you're doing. So
the best thing to do is just go to lauramorelli.com, and it's MORELLI, one R, two L's. And you can download a free short story about the plague of all things. That's sort of if you're up for that right now, you can check out my books, you can check out my courses, and you can always email me at lauramorelli.com. I love to hear from you.
Well, it's been great having you on, and I wish you all the success with this. I really love what you're doing and how you're making it such an awesome spectrum of options for your fans, right? Like if they want to go complete nerd, they've got the opportunity to do that. Or if they just want to enjoy your stories for what they are, they can do that wide, whatever platform, including direct. It's good.
Well, thank you. This was really fun, Joe. I love what you do too, to help authors really put on their business hats. It's a real need in our community. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Well, let's get back together again. It'll be interesting to hear how this launch compares to your traditional launch, given the circumstances of
maybe
the shutdown.
We can talk in September and see how things go, with the book launch and the pandemic and and how that all pans out. So maybe I'll see you in Florida in September.
Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be down in Florida together.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Joe. Thank you. See you later. Bye.
Bye.